Hello and welcome to Trojan Talk. I'm your host, Aaron Taylor. Today we'll be talking about the author of this year's Common Reader at Troy University. He's my guest today, Ishmael Beah. Ishmael, thanks for joining me here today.
Thank you.
And as I mentioned, you're the author of this year's Common Reader, A Long Way Gone, Memoirs of a Boy Soldier. All Troy University freshmen are reading this book this year, talking about it in classes, doing things about this book and learning about your story. Now, before we get into what Troy University is doing with it and how you feel, tell us a little bit about your story, how you came to write this book and where you came from to make this book happen.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. I was born in Sierra Leone, which is a very small country in West Africa. And during my very early childhood years, we had a civil war. And that war interrupted my life. And I lost everything that was dear to me, including my immediate family in the war. And then I was recruited to fight as a soldier in the war when I was 13. Now, I was fortunate enough to be removed from the fighting and went through all the processes to recover. And eventually, long story short, I was adopted into a family in the United States. And in New York, I came to live, which is where I did my last 2 years of high school and then went on to higher education. But it was during that time that I was in the United States that really I began to think about the fact that most people did not know where I was coming from. And when they knew, there was no context. So writing the book really came out of that desire to give the human context to the story, to put a face to it. But most importantly, not only to introduce people to what the nature of violence is in war, but also the strength of the human spirit to pull through. You know, so these were the conversations that were not had when people would talk about it, and I wanted to change that.
And that's one of the things, when this book was first brought up here at the university, a lot of people learned something they didn't know. They didn't know about the child fighters. They didn't know about recruiting children to fight. And obviously now you've opened eyes to this horror that's going on over there. And how does that make you feel to be able to, I guess, open eyes to the public about something that's going on that many people don't know about?
Well, I think for me, you know, when you survive a situation like what I survived, there's a little bit of guilt that comes with it, in the sense that why me, why I survived, why many people did not. So when I decided to publish this book, for me it was a small price to pay for having survived, for having lived in a way. And also I knew, even though I was now in an environment where people were far removed from these realities, they may not even think about it, I knew it was going on as I went on with my daily life, having access to be able to eat 3-4 meals a day if I chose, going to schools that were functional, you know, living in a city where people were sort of naive about the state of the world. There was always that thing in the back of my head that there's a child who is going through what I've been through. And how do I make sure to remind people constantly so that they don't forget? So that's the desire. You know?
Now, how long did the process take from when you first thought, I need to write this book, to actually getting it published and getting it out there to the people?
3 years.
Mm-hmm.
The writing process of it was 3 years. And then it took another 2 years to just get it published, you know, and things like that, you know. Yeah.
Had you done any kind of writing prior to that, even just small writing, or before you tried to tackle a full book?
Yes, I had written short stories,
Mm-hmm.
mostly fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually when I was writing this book, I was never in the intention to publish it. I did it as a side project
Mm-hmm.
in university. I was a political science student, but one of the writing professors saw that I had a talent and said, you not only have a talent, but you also have a story. So I'm going to make sure you write something. So I wrote it, and I actually wanted to go to law school and all the rest of it before it got published.
Before it got published. Now, this book is being studied by Troy University students this year, freshmen. They're discussing it in classes, is being brought up. How does that make you feel that your story is being used in the curriculum for a university and being taught to students at a university level?
Well, it's amazing. I mean, it's every writer's dream to have your story so accessible. But I think particularly with the content of the story, I think what has always moved me is how much people connect to it in their own various ways. And when I was writing it, I had no idea whether people even want to read it. Maybe people would be scared of reading it. So it's always been really interesting for me to see how people are absorbing it and what people are doing with it. It's remarkable. It has a whole life of its own that is beyond me.
Yeah, beyond you. But now, obviously, you're removed from this, but you can look back on it and be able to talk to people and share your story even outside of the book and give them more context to the book. And that's, I guess, now that kind of lives on in the fact that you can keep telling the story and relating to what's going on in this book to people, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this story in the book happened years ago, and I wrote the book in 2007, but people who are encountering now is their first time. So I also have to honor that novelty for them in their mind, the images that are, all the way in my past are fresh in their mind. So I also have to honor that curiosity when I meet them,
Well, it's good that you've written this book and that Troy University students get to learn a little something about what's going on in a part of the world they probably didn't know about until then. We want to thank you for joining us today and welcome you to Troy University.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on today's edition of Trojan Talk.